Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I am your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 200 with Riley Sullivan. He is a musician, and on that episode, we talked about his love for music and pretty much kind of like why he got into music and stuff of that nature. And you could support him and check that episode out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll, at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up, as well as, the release of the 5 pillars to create a meaningful life, now available on Amazon. Only available on Amazon. Get it, buy the book, support me, please. I put a lot of time and effort into this book, and after you buy it, after you read it, please submit a review on Amazon. That goes a long way with the ratings and algorithm in supporting this book, so please do that. So, that brings me to episode 201, The Birthday Reflection, year 29. And on this episode, I'll be recapping this past year, my 28th year on this earth, and kind of talking about the book, talking about episode 200 that released last week. And as well, we hit 20,000 plus downloads. And I've kind of hit that for a while, but I wanted to wait until passing episode 200 and kind of having that out there and just kind of releasing that and talking about that all together. So huge milestones, huge things to discuss on this birthday reflection. Very important year, and obviously November 5th being election day. If you guys are listening on this episode, go and vote. Are listening on this episode on this day, please go vote. It means a lot to our country, and this is kind of like a whole civic duty. So please do that, regardless of who you vote. We're not going to get into the politics today. This is just strictly about me, about my birthday, and just kind of like reflecting on what's kind of been. So we'll start with episode 200. Huge milestone. Like, honestly, you asked me way back on like episode 2 or something like that, or like even like episode like 12 or in the 20s, like, you're gonna do 200 podcast episodes. I'd be like, not a chance. No way I do 200 podcast episodes. But here we are on 201, reflecting on 200 episodes that we've done this far. And it's honestly insane to think back about when I started this podcast in around October of 2019. The thought of it was kind of when I was in Georgia, and you guys have heard the story many times. If you're an avid listener of the podcast, you definitely know kind of that story and kind of what transpired, which led to the creation of this podcast. And to think about that, and also we're hitting 5 years of doing this podcast. The release is sometime in November when I released it, so it's like not like officially 5 years, but for me, recording the podcast, has been 5 years of doing this. And I'm so thankful to have had the opportunity to do 200 episodes. Obviously, some solo, some repeat guests, and a lot of new guests. And this podcast doesn't exist without people like yourself that are willing to come on the podcast, people like yourself that are watching or listening to this podcast. None of that happens without the support of people like yourself. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for actually caring enough to listen to what I have to say. And even if it's like 10 seconds or 5 minutes or half an hour of a podcast that you guys listen to, that you guys even gave it a chance to listen to, whether it's me or it's the guest that I'm interviewing, I just appreciate any type of support when it comes to the podcast, because it's like, this is me. This is kind of like my brand and my platform. And the fact that I've been able to create and sustain a platform is huge, because when you're thinking about social media and the digital age, it's hard to get your voice out there when you don't have your own platform. So I wasn't thinking about that when I created this podcast back in the day. But now, as I've grown with it and time has gone on, I see how valuable it is to have a platform, to be able to interview people who have different viewpoints or different opinions or different backgrounds, and just ask them why they do what they do. And as you've grown with me through the podcast, if you've listened to different episodes here or there, you've seen that growth within myself to reflect on how to be a better host, to be a better listener, to be a better communicator. And having this platform is so meaningful to me because I get to share this growth with you guys and future listeners. And as you might know, I do wish to have a family one day, and being able to show them this, and maybe they listen to this episode one day, which is a crazy thought. But that is like a really cool concept to me. And just being able to share my opinions on stuff is valuable. And even if we get into the book launch, which we'll do in a little bit, um, being able to have this platform to launch a book off of is huge. The fact that I got a ton of support on the book is stems from the fact that I've done a podcast for 5 years. Like, I put a lot of time and effort into this podcast, which ultimately helped create a book. Like, the book doesn't happen without 5 years of being on a podcast. And I said that recently on a podcast. I think it was with Ray Lambert. Great guy. Check that out, episode 199. But when I think about the goals that I kind of set out for this year, creating a book was like very high up on that list. And you guys probably heard me throughout the podcast. If you've listened to episodes recently, I've been talking about a secret project, a secret project, a secret project. And that secret project was the 5 pillars to creating a meaningful life. And I put a lot of time and effort into this book. And to kind of give some background of why I ended up writing this book, I've always thought about writing a book, but I just never felt motivated to like actually write. And flashing back to a little bit of a year ago, so probably a little bit past at this point, I was kind of hitting a wall with like my own like mindset a little bit in terms of like what I wanted to do like next, because I feel like this podcast kind of is what it is with the platform. I'm not going to change things up, at least right now, to try to gain a new audience or gain a new like, I don't know. I guess really audience is kind of where I'm leaning, but the views and the algorithms and all that stuff doesn't motivate me as much as it once did to like maybe try to like make more popular content in terms of like talking points. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I enjoy what I'm doing. I still enjoy what I'm doing. And I think that's a huge thing when you're talking about passions and talking about stuff that you've created. If you still enjoy doing what you do, you're probably on the right path. And when you stop enjoying it is when you should start changing and reevaluating and things of that nature. But for my podcast, I really enjoy this platform. So when I think about last year, I was like, well, I can't really change. I've added the 3 cameras, as you guys have seen through the last year or so. And I could always update the microphones. I've gotten new merch. I've got the new merch right now with Your Life Matters t-shirts with the suicide hotline on the back. Um, and I made some blue and some purple ones, and I've had t-shirts over the year between the tie-dye shirts and the mental health matters shirts and just the traditional OG Carroll Connection t-shirt, as well as a hoodie. And I'll probably still create merch as I go, um, as I feel like needed or I need new sizes and things. But I was like, what's next? And at that time period, I don't really talk too much about my personal like work life because I try to keep those two separately. But for the purposes of explaining the book, it really kind of was intertwined because I was presented with a opportunity to kind of take the next step in kind of like my career a little bit. And great job on paper, working with pretty much the same people, just taking another step. But for me, the role just didn't feel right. I don't know how to like explain it better, to be completely honest. It was just something internal, and I was going through a lot of personal stuff with things in my family, and I'm not going to discuss those because those are also obviously personal. And maybe one day I'll get into that stuff, but there was a lot of things happening at that time, and my emotions were kind of up in the air, of conflicted of whether I take this like on paper it's the right thing to do, but in my heart it just didn't feel right. And I ultimately decided not to take the job. And when I did that, I had to like kind of get honest with myself of like, well, if I'm not going to do this, like I can't just keep doing the same thing and expecting something different to happen. So if I'm going to say no to this job, I have to dedicate some time into something else. And I started meditating and starting getting back into journaling and just started trying to like get in touch with like my inner self again, because I hadn't been journaling and I hadn't really been meditating. And for me, it's one of those things that come and go. I don't always meditate and I don't always journal. and I hadn't been really reading too much lately, and I kind of was just like, let me just try to like kind of reconnect. Let me just de-stress, disconnect, and listen to myself. Truly, I really started meditating again and started trying to listen to myself to try to hear what my inner thoughts were telling me and what message that I might have been blocking. And what came to me was like a slow concept of a book. And I started reflecting on uh, my journal therapy worksheets where I had like 100 words and I had to constrict it down to like 50 and then my top 10 and all that stuff. And I started thinking about that list. I started thinking about Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules to Life, which is a huge inspiration for this book and his style of writing. And when I started thinking about it, I was like, okay, started creating like a list of like 5 things that I'm like, I could kind of write about this. Like maybe I could write a book. And the thought started to creep in and I started like taking notes and using my journaling as my note taking. And then it became, well, how do I write a book? Well, same way I started the podcast, I had to do research. So what I started doing was started to research about how to start a book, where to begin with the book, like book prompts. Like there's so many different avenues to go when you're thinking about writing a book. And for me, Amazon KDP was the way to go. It's a self-publishing platform and strictly through Amazon. There's many different ways and many different platforms that you could choose. I just personally wanted the easiest route to publish my book, and they obviously take a huge percentage of it. But uh, I'm not really concerned with the profit as much as I was concerned with writing a book and becoming an author. And I'm not going to tell you what's in the 5 pillars to create a meaningful life, obviously here, but the working concept basically was to describe when you kind of identify, acknowledge, and nurture these 5 pillars, they can help create meaning in your life. And I start off early in the book where I kind of say something along the lines of like, I'm going to give you tons of stats and statistics that back up these 5 pillars or show you why there might be lacking in society. You can Google them yourself, and I give the sources in the back of the book, and I label them throughout the book of where I'm getting my sources to highlight the issues that we have with these 5 pillars or how these 5 pillars can create more meaning in your life. And it's not to, I wrote this book not to tell you how to get rich, not to tell you how to get famous, but to add something to your life that, or at least acknowledge something that you might have been missing. Like, I'm not some famous rich person or like philosopher or psychologist or any of that. Like, I have no degrees in that. I just love podcasting. I love psychology. I love like the concept of spiritual growth and the mind and just like purpose and passion. Like obviously I end every podcast with what would your advice be for someone who wants to pursue their passion? Well, let's break that down. And I started thinking about like things that could like actually create meaning in your life. And you don't have to do a podcast. You don't have to do a YouTube channel. You don't have to write a book to create meaning in your life. And that was kind of like the thought process was like identifying these things that I believed added meaning to my life. And when I did that, it led me to the creation of this book. And I got to give a huge shout out to Aram Diarbian. He was on my podcast. He is a awesome creator. He has his own art page where he creates liminal space art and like 3D art and AI art. Dude is phenomenal. Huge Instagram following, only going to get bigger. Please go support him. As well as huge shout out to my girlfriend, Elise Borgard. I love you so much. You put up with me as I wrote this book. You helped me edit a lot of my grammatical errors, which were a lot. And I just appreciate that you stuck with me and pushed me and helped me along with creating this book because this book doesn't happen without you guys. Um, so I have to like include that obviously. But just to be able to say that I'm an author is the coolest thing in the world. And the support, like I mentioned earlier, from people on the podcast, my family, and even work colleagues that were very supportive and even helped get it posted in like our kind of like our weekly, like, um, how do I say it? Like newsletter, I guess, to go out there. And a lot of them bought it. Some of them actually already read it. I've had a few people that have read the book and were really excited with the book and really giving positive feedback to what I was writing. It's a very short book. It's like probably 60, 70 pages of actual reading, sources, documentation, all that stuff. Intro, conclusion are in there as well. 100-page book, complete cover to front, or yeah, cover to back. And um, I just can't believe the support that I got for it. And it started as just like a crazy dream that I was like, I could be an author one day. Like I could write a book. Like I could think I could do that. And I was never the biggest English person in high school. I didn't like writing, but it's different when you're actually writing about something you care about. And for me to like go down this path was very eye opening, and creating a structure that actually worked for me, and dedicating time during like the weeknights. And I really didn't write too much on the weekends. I tried to let my weekends actually be my weekends, and focused at least 30 minutes a day to writing or researching or contributing to the creation of this book. And I had to do that like every day. Like as soon as work ended, or if I had an early start and I was working from home, got in, typed stuff up. And that way I didn't burn myself out with this process, because it's very daunting to write a book. So doing it this way really stretched it out where it didn't feel like I was writing a lot. And then I got to reflect every day when I would go to sleep, and I'd think about it of like, what am I going to write next? How do I continue this? And over the course of a year, basically, I was able to create the book and write the book. And it's one of the coolest things that I've ever created. I can't lie. The fact that I have a podcast, I'm a podcaster, been doing that for 5 years, have over 200 episodes and 20,000 listens, downloads, watches. And I wrote a 100-page book that's a self-help book, and talking about like kind of creating meaning in your life. It's kind of on brand, but I'm really excited that I was able to write it and kind of publish it and have it out there and see it on Amazon the same way that I see my podcast on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. Just to see it is different. Like when you tell someone you're going to do something, they're like, yeah, yeah, I believe you. That's cool. Like they're like kind of supportive, but like they don't see it. They don't see your vision. It's not tangible to them. But when you post like a podcast or you write a book and you hand them that book, it's tangible. They see it. They're like, oh, you actually did this. This is like really cool. And this goes back to the points that I've always hit on this podcast. It was like, you have to believe in yourself. You have to do the work. If you don't do the work, it doesn't get done. Period. You have to be the believer. You have to be the worker. And I'm very big on that, because I could have complained my way through this book and never wrote it, or just said it's too hard, or it's taking too long, or all these different things about complaining about why I'm not achieving this goal. But instead, I worked really, really hard and dedicated myself to making sure that I wrote the best possible book that I could at this point in my life. I dedicated myself to do this podcast the best way that I could for the last 5 years. And I'm going to keep doing these things. I'm going to keep striving to create new things and be a creator and have fun and dive into my creative aspects. But coming back to it, it's all about you. You have to be the one. And when I think about this past year, and I think about my birthday, and this is always a huge point of reflection for myself. And I think this is going to be one of the more powerful birthday reflections that I've ever had, because I've accomplished so much up until this point. And even within like my own personal relationships, I feel like I've grown a lot. I have a very happy relationship with my girlfriend. I'm very appreciative to the person that she is, and allows me to be who I am, and believes in me. And that my family's healthy and my family loves me, and that they're very supportive of this book as well. This is one of the most successful years that I've had in a long time. Even like my own personal fitness journey. I had an injury back in 2023, like a hamstring injury playing flag football. And it really has hampered me in terms of my fitness. But this past year, I started doing 5 a.m., like 5 a.m., 5:30 workouts again. And I was able to like lose about like 10 to 15 pounds, and then sustain it over the last several months. And I found a routine that just like really works for me. And I'm very happy about that, that I have a routine where I'm able to kind of balance exercise with some diet, but I still enjoy my weekends. I still have good food. I love Taco Bell. I've talked on the podcast. I love dessert. I love chocolate. And I balance that with like broccoli, rice, couscous. That's like my lunch every single day during the week. I'm big on overnight oats and limiting the snacking during the week. And I've been able to balance that with a good, steady workout routine. Like this past year has brought so many new things into my life that I wasn't aware was possible, honestly. And it's just like another step of growth for myself as we're entering the last year of my 20s. Like thinking about what's to come is very interesting, but also kind of scary. It's like we're going to enter a completely new phase of my life. And hopefully that comes with owning a house, having a family. And that's going to bring a whole new wave of challenges and excitement and new adventures in. And I'm excited to see what that brings. And who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what this podcast becomes in the next year? Who knows if I start writing another book or creating something new? And I'm already trying to brainstorm ideas as we're speaking about what to create next. And I'm just excited to bring you guys more stuff. I think that's like the main point that I kind of want to hit on with this birthday reflection is I'm still enjoying the creation of things. I still enjoy creating the podcast. I still enjoy talking to people and getting to like the whys and like why they do their passion and why do they enjoy it. And that's like the biggest thing when I talk about finding what you love to do and continuing to do it until you don't want to do it anymore. For me, I still want to do this. I still enjoy this. I don't care if this episode gets 10 views on YouTube. I don't care. I enjoy doing this. This is for me, especially this episode. This is me reflecting on my birthday and reflecting on my past year, my struggles, my successes, everything in between. This one's for me. And when you're talking about your passions and your purpose almost, you kind of have to be a little bit selfish with it. You have to really enjoy that thing. You have to talk about it and you have to bring it to existence and like you have to do it. Just like I said earlier, you have to do it. Like I don't get to 200 podcast episodes if I complain and ask someone else to do it or co-host with me, like lean on stuff. Like no, I did this myself. And I'm proud that I did this myself. I've created a platform that has been very inclusive. I've had diverse guests. I've had all these different things that have come on this podcast and shared their story with me. And I appreciate every single one of them for doing that because they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to come on my podcast. They don't have to believe in me. They could have said no. They could talk shit behind my back. They could say, nah, he's corny. That podcast is stupid. They don't, though. They come on every week or every week that I at least try and they talk to me as a person and they share their story on this platform. So in the end, I think I'm doing something. I think I'm doing something positive and I'm enjoying creating this art. I enjoyed creating this book and I hope you guys are enjoying reading it. I appreciate anyone that's bought the book, that supported me in this podcast. And I'm excited to bring you guys a lot more in 2025 and the rest of 2024. I have some good episodes lined up. I have a good year in review episode lined up. Hopefully everyone's good and healthy and nothing gets sick or rescheduled. But I have some great collabs. I plan on going on some podcasts, a quote unquote book tour, talking about the book a little bit on different platforms. But I wanted to give you guys um, a solo episode of me talking about this. And I knew this birthday reflection episode was coming up. Was hoping it was going to line up with 200. Just didn't happen this year. So it is what it is. We're coming into this with 201, so we're kind of reflecting on that. But the things that are coming up in the future are exciting. I have guests booked the rest of the year. I'm already talking to some people for January. If you want to be a guest, hit me up. I'm already looking for that. If you want to come back on the podcast, please hit me up. I would love to interview, especially if you were on before episode 83, before I started doing YouTube. Please hit me up. I would love to do another episode with you guys because I feel like you guys deserve to have an episode that's on YouTube. So if you're interested and you've been on this podcast from episode 1 all the way to 83, and you'd love to come back and talk to me, we could talk about anything, everything you've been up to, and stuff in between. Hit me up. I want to get those people back on. Just to recap, I think it'd be really great to kind of see the growth between ourselves and kind of just talk. I think it's great to connect, obviously. So, kind of wrap this up and try not to drag on with these birthday reflections, but kind of hitting the point. Birthday reflections for me are super meaningful because it gives me a chance to reflect on where I've been and kind of where I'm going, especially for this one as I'm turning 29, the last year of my 20s, and to see what I've kind of accomplished, especially these last 5 years of doing a podcast, 200 episodes, 20,000 plus downloads, watches, everything in between. just wrote this new book. I'm really proud of the work that I put in as a content creator. And it's basically like my next phase of life. I had high school and then college and now this 5 years of content creating, and you guys got to really see, especially if you've been watching me grow as a creator. And I just again appreciate anyone that's been on this platform, that's bought the book, and that has watched my videos on Instagram or YouTube, like, or TikTok. Like I just appreciate everything that has been coming my way in terms of support and respect. And just you guys don't understand how much you mean to me when you come on this platform and share your story with me. And these episodes are my chance to kind of say that on camera. And hopefully you guys see these clips and appreciate that. And um, just again, thank you guys. So, kind of bring it home here. If you guys want to check out other episodes, go to the carrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you want to watch it, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up for you. If you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll, at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. And if you want to be buy the book, 5 Pillars to Create a Meaningful Life on Amazon, only on Amazon, and get that, buy that, support me, please, and review it as well. I really appreciate any of that, and really excited to bring you guys some more great guests as we wrap up 2024, and look forward to 2025, and looking forward to bringing you guys some more great content. So, until next time, guys, peace.